Hello, and welcome to Object Reports Basics. This course is being provided to you by Computer Logic Group, or as some of you may know us, CLG. My name is Dory Baldwin, and I'm one of the CLG Power School trainers. It's my pleasure today to take you through the wonderful world of object reports. Well, we can't cover everything in this basic course. The agenda for this day is to talk about why object reports, some of the basics of an object report. We'll look at formatting that you can do within the object report. And then lastly, we'll talk about two basic types of object reports, the single student information report and a multi-student information report. So let's start with the why object reports. It is one of my favorite reports because it has control over everything. Everything that you put on the page, you tell it exactly where on the page you want that object to go. It allows you to add graphics. Many times a lot of you want to do a simple form letter, but you also want to put your school logo on it. You can't in a form letter do that, but you can in an object report. You also have the ability to create multiple pages for a single student. So think about that packet that goes home to the parents at the beginning of the year. You could do that as one object report and it would create that 6-page, 5-page packet for you with the student's information already pre-printed, which would not only save the parents time, but also allow you easier inputting of that information because you're only going to be looking at the changes. And then lastly, you can create a multiple student per page report, so something like a class list or a class roster. So the two types of reports that we're really going to deal with will be the single student, or think of mail merge type report. The other type of report that we're going to actually create today will be a multi-student report. This is that class roster type report. So object reports are true to their name. It is a report created by placing objects on a page. What you're seeing here are the different types of objects that are available to place on the page. Text, just what you'd expect. It's typed words. Now text also includes the field names and data access tags, or what we call DAT codes, so that you can pull things like students' information, attendance, today's date, different pieces of information that are already stored in the system and place them on the report. A line, a straight or diagonal line. Box just allows you to create a box and put it around your text. The circle we'll actually use in one of the reports that we create today. So we'll get into more detail on the circle later, but you can assume that it's a round circle. Transcript object, that is one of the special objects that we will not be covering in this lesson, but it allows you to pull historical grade information and put it on a transcript type report. The fee list, if you're using the fees within PowerSchool, the fee list will allow you to create invoices and accounts payable type reports. It is also one that we will not be covering in this lesson. Pictures. Pictures include both student photos and images that you have uploaded into PowerSchool. Anything like your school logo, maybe a principal's signature, can be uploaded into PowerSchool and used on reports as long as it is a JPEG type file. Sequence. This is one of the objects that I very rarely see used. It allows you to create a sequential number that is entered onto the report so that as the report prints, each page has its own sequential number. So, picture's worth 1,000 words, and I'm a visual learner, so this is what we're talking about here. You see we can use the student's photo to put it in information about the school in a text form in a header area. You can separate that header area from the main portion of your report by using a line. You could take a box and place it around the student information area to highlight that. Also, we have that ability to create that circle, and by using what we call layers, which we'll get into in detail, you can add items on top of each other so that in this case the logo is printed on top of the circle. So let's talk first about that picture object. If you have student photos loaded into your system, those are available to you by default. Now, anything else that you want to put into PowerSchool and use on your reports, you can do so as long as they're JPEG format and you've imported them into the system. In order to let you know how that's done, I want to take a minute here and switch over to PowerSchool and actually import a couple of photo items that we're going to use in our reports. So here we are on the start page of PowerSchool. And everything that we're going to be working with today as far as object reports go, we'll be going under System Reports and then to the Setup tab. At this time we want to talk about pictures, so it's the picture link that I want to click here, and you'll see I already have some pictures uploaded to my system, and these are pictures that I can now use. To upload or import a file that you wanted to use, you use the Choose File button, and that opens up and allows you to find and select the file that you want to upload. And I have one right here called the RHS logo. So I've selected it. I'm going to click Open, and you'll see now it's here, but it's not imported until I click Submit. Once you click Submit, it now shows on your list of items. Anytime that you want to delete something that's here, simply check the box at the front, click Submit, and that item goes away. The text object is the next object I'd like to talk about. As I said, this is anything that is standard typed text, so anything that you literally type is going to show up as typed. And then this is also where you're going to use field names from the system to pull that information out of PowerSchool. So for a student's last first, you would use either the tilde or the wavy line, parentheses last first, or that caret symbol, parentheses last first. This works for any of the fields that are in the student's table. Use the tilde, parentheses, and whatever the field name is, followed by a closed parentheses to get that field. So if you look at the example, the typed text of to the parent and guardian of will show up just as typed. And then any of the fields that I've typed will pull the information out of the system and will give you that student's name, address, city, state, and zip. There are some other tables that you can pull fields from, and the most common one that we use is the schools table, which is table number 39. To pull information from other tables, it follows the same basic format of that tilde and then parentheses. The only difference here is I have to, in square brackets, include the table name or the table number. In this case, in the examples I've shown you, 39 as the table number, and then name will pull the school name. Now the advantage of using this will allow you, if you have multiple schools, it will allow you to use the same report irregardless of what school you're printing it for. So the elementary school will print out the elementary school name, and the high school will print out the high school name. So always recommend that if you have the opportunity to use the codes, then you aren't creating multiple reports. So in this example, I'm pulling tilde, parentheses, square bracket 39, name, and it's giving me Retriever High School. Same thing with the address, the school city, school state, and school phone. Data access tags, or DAT codes, are also very handy in helping you to pull out information other than standard field names. So as you can see from this example, I can pull stored grade information. I can also pull period information. So if I know my homeroom period is always in HR1, I could pull out the teacher's name for that homeroom. Some other common data access tags are date and time, student's age, GPA, honor roll, daily attendance, period attendance, stored grades, and if you're using them, you can pull standards as well. So a lot of functionality in the data access tags. So in this example, you can see that I'm using the data access tag of caret, square brackets, letter.date, and it's going to pull out for me March 5th, 2013 or 2014 or whatever date you are currently printing that report for. I'm using a decode, which allows me to look at the grade level. In this case, if the grade level is 9, it's going to replace that and print freshman. If the grade level is 10, it will print sophomore, 11 junior, and 12 senior. And then here's that period information that we talked about. Using the tilde period underscore info, as long as I identify what period it is I'm pulling the information from, I could pull the teacher name, course name, anything about that period that's available in those data access tags. If I'm doing a multi-page report, I can also use the caret square bracket page number field that allows me to number my pages so I can keep them in correct order. So this is our first report. We're going to create a simple form letter. It's going to pull in some information about the school, the date, information about the student and their address. And then lastly, we're going to use one of those decodes to figure out what grade they're in and what homeroom teacher they're going to be assigned to. Okay, so here we are at our start page in PowerSchool. We're going to go under System Reports, Setup, and choose Object Reports to create our object report. From here, since this is a new report, I'm going to click on New, and I need to set up the shell of that report. So the first thing I need to do is give it a report name. Now, be careful as you name these, because others in your system will be using the report, so you want it to be as understandable as possible. I'm going to name mine with just my initials and form letter. There are other tables besides the student table that you can create reports for. There's the student schedule, staff, and logs table. You can select the default font for your letter, as well as the default size. And by typical layouts, you want your line height to be 2 larger than your font size. So I'm going to change that to 13. Also, when I'm dealing with object reports, I clear out all of my margins because I want to deal with everything from the edge of the pages and not have to worry about the fact that margins were set as well. So I set those all to 0. It is going to be portrait since it's a letter. In here, you can choose if you want it for users at all schools, which means anybody can run this report, or users just at Retriever High School. You also can check the box to allow teachers to print this report. Once you have those all set, go ahead and click Submit. And now you'll see that the structure of your object report is right here as DLB form letter. To add objects to the report then, click on the name of the report, and that brings you into edit mode for the object report. And you'll see those objects like we talked about earlier right here at the top of the page. This particular report is going to have 2 objects. It's going to have the text object, which will be the actual letter part of the report. So I'm going to call this my form letter. Now in a text object, this box here, the text fields box, is where you're actually going to put the meat of your letter. So I'm going to actually copy in, to save some time here, my letter. So here you'll see the letter date, like we talked about earlier, that school information using the fields and not manually typing it in. Then I'm going to use the fields for student information. And I'm also going to throw in those decodes for my different grade levels and my homeroom teacher information by using that DAT code. Like I said earlier, everything has to be positioned on a page. So I'm going to position this on the page 1 inch from the left side and 1 inch from the top of the page, my XY coordinates. Because it is a text box and I have to define the entire box, I don't want it running off the edge of my page. I also need to set a maximum width. If I'm going to use a 1 inch margin on both the left and right side, that's 2 inches that I take from the entire page of 8.5, which gives me 6.5 maximum width for my text area. Now within the text object, you can also change things about the font, the style, the size, heights, color. We'll talk about those later as we build our second report. When you're done with entering the information, go ahead and click Submit, and you'll see you now have an object within your report. The next object we're going to add is that picture, which will be our high school logo or mascot. So I'm going to call this my logo. Now by default, when I add a picture, it thinks I want to put a student photo on, so that's the default here. Using the drop down though, I can choose any of those items that I've imported into the system instead of the student photo. So I'm going to use my RHS logo, and now I have to tell it exactly where I want that logo to fit. And I'm going to actually create a box. So the left side of this, I want 2 inches from the right margin. So 8.5 minus 2, I'm going to put it at 6.5. The top, I want an inch down, so I'm going to create that at 1. And I want my box to be 1 inch total. So if I want it 1 inch, my right side of the box is going to be 6.5 plus 1, which would be 7.5. And my bottom of the box is going to be at 2. The scaling options that you have are to shrink an image to fit or fill the box with the image. And I'm going to fill the box with the image proportionally and centered because I want it to stay within the right proportions. Once again, you have page and layer information here. At this time, we're just going to click Submit and leave everything on the same page, same layer. You now have 2 things on your form letter. You have the actual letter, which is the text in the fields, and you have the picture of the logo positioned in the upper right-hand side of the page. So now let's talk about an easy way to see what you have going on and also leave your object report open so you can make changes. I'm going to leave this page as it is, and I'm going to right-click on my PowerSchool logo, and I'm going to open it in a new tab. So now you see I have two tabs, one with my start page and one with my object report available for me. From the start page, I want to select some students and run this report to see what it's going to look like. So I'm going to click on my E's and select those 10 students. And from the drop-down menu for group functions, I'm going to go ahead and choose Print Report. From the Print Report, I'm going to find my report. It's right here, DOB form letter. Choose it. And because I know that none of my students have any schedule information in the 14-15 year, I'm simply going to change back to the 13-14 year so you can see that schedule information as well. Go ahead and click Submit. It's going to run my report. Now, when you view a report, it's going to open up in the same window. Sometimes that gives you problems when you try to get back to your Q window, so I always recommend to right-click on it, open it in a new tab, so you can simply close the tab down when you're done looking at it. But here you see the letter that we just created. It gives me the date, the Retriever High School information, the student's information, and then it decodes their grade level, prints out freshman for this student, and also their teacher name. There's the logo that you put up in the upper right-hand corner. As you scroll down through the different students, you'll see that there's different grade levels, and there's also different teacher names. Now, if you do see a teacher or a student without a teacher name, it's because they don't have a course during that period of 1A that we chose. So quick and easily, you created your own report. We're able to see how some of those DAT codes worked, and also we're able to add a picture to that report. Congratulations on getting your first report done. Keep in mind, though, that it's not always as easy as you think it should be. Sometimes you'll have to go back and readjust codes. You might have missed a comma or semicolon where it should have been. The key is work until you get it right. Once it's right, it's done forever and you don't have to worry about it again. Formatting becomes one of the big advantages in these object reports because you can use basic HTML type formatting. On this page, you'll see some standard format codes that can be used, from adjusting font size to making font bold, italics, or underlined. Remember, anytime you use basic HTML formatting, if I turn it on, I need to turn it off by using the slash and then code, as you see at the end of each of these lines. Tabs become your best friend. Being able to align your text on the page the way you want it is supplemented by using the tab codes. In this page, you will see all of the codes that are available to you. The tab left, right, center, decimal place, and then a special move to, which allows you to specify both the X and Y coordinates on the page that you want to move the text to. Layering, as we talked about before, gives the ability to lay objects on top of other objects, and that's what we're going to do with our next report. The next report we create is going to be an Honor Student Certificate. We are going to use boxes and colored boxes, and we are going to layer them on top of each other so that we can create a three-dimensional type look for our document. I'll also talk about how we can create that starburst out of a circle object. We'll look at applying line objects, and then we'll talk a lot more about how it can change text objects by changing color, sizes, fonts to give a finished look to our document. In this case, as you look at the layers, our bottom layer is going to be that blue box, and then we're going to set on top of that our white box. Our text in graphic image then will sit on top of the white box, and finally our starburst will be the very top layer, or layer 3. So remember, it always goes from lowest number to highest number when you're working with layers. One of the things that I also like to tell classes when I teach is in object reports, you want to get yourself some graph paper and always start with the end in mind. If you can use your graph paper and lay out exactly where you want your text, it'll be much easier as you start positioning things on the page. 1/4 inch graph paper allows you to get to a 1/4 of an inch on your XY coordinates, and then you can adjust them as you need to from there. So here's the second report that we're going to create, our honor certificate. And just like before, we're going to go from Start Page to System Reports to Setup, Object Reports, and New. Just like in my previous report, I have to lay out the shell of the report first. So I'm titling this report DLB Certificate, just so I know it's my certificate. In this case, I'm going to use the text objects to lay out different sizes and fonts of text, so I don't care about the default fonts here. I do want it to be a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I want all of my margins set to 0, so I'm working from the actual page margins and not the margins. The orientation in this case is going to be landscape versus portrait. All users at all schools are going to be able to use this report, and I do want to set it so teachers can print. Once I click Submit, here's my shell. I can go ahead and click on it to start adding objects to my report. The first object that I'm going to add is that blue background box. I'm going to call it my blue box. I need to lay out exactly what I want the coordinates for that box to be, and I want it to be the entire page. So my left and top are going to be at 0, and my right is at 11, and my bottom at 8.5. So it goes the whole 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. My line color and fill color, I'm going to set to be the exact same colors. And you can look at the different colors available by clicking on the line color, and it'll show you the whole list of all the colors available to you. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose navy. I'm just going to highlight it, copy it, use my back button, and paste in navy for both the line color and the fill color. This is going to be my background layer, so I'm going to leave it at layer 0 and click Submit. I now have my blue box created, and I want to create on top of that my white box. So once again, I'm going to choose box as the object type. It's my white box. Now for this box, I want it to be an inch in from all of the borders. So it's going to be 1 inch from the left, 1 inch from the top. The right was at 11, so 1 inch from that would be 10. And the bottom will be at 7.5, so it'll be 1 inch from the 8.5. For this example, I do want my line color to be different than my fill color, so I'm going to go ahead and set my line width to be a little bit wider. We're going to make it 4 points, and then I'm going to click on my line colors again to come out here and choose a sky blue, copy that, and I'm going to paste that in for my line color, and my fill color is going to be white. Now this box I want to set on top of my other box, so I do need to change the layer, so it's now going to be at layer 1. Go ahead and submit that. So at this point I have my blue box and my white box, the white box having a border of light blue around that. Let's just move over to our report queue area here and grab our student. Just going to pick an individual student so we can see what this report looks like. We choose to print a report, and the report I'm going to print is that DLB certificate. Go ahead and submit that. Just want you to see where we're at this point in time. We're going to open that in its new tab, and you see we have that dark blue box with the white box on top of it and that light blue border around. Now you can adjust colors and sizes and anything else that you want about that. The next thing we're going to do is start looking at how we can add text to this box. As we look back at our document, you see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basic areas of text. We could do this as one text object, but then we'd have to figure out how to adjust the text style and font within the actual object by adding HTML coding. It's actually easier in this case to create 5 different objects, then we're only dealing with the same type of text for those objects. So that's what we're going to do in this next section. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the text objects to the report. As before, we're going to choose a text object, and I'm going to number these so I know which one's what. I'm going to start with 01, and this is going to be my school name. Now the text itself I want centered on the page, so I'm going to use one of my tabs. I'm going to use a tab center, and I want it at half of the 11, so that's going to be at 5.5. And then what I'm going to put in here is a code to pull my school name. Since I've already controlled my X coordinate with the tab, I don't need to worry about the X here, but I do need to know where the Y is going to be. Now, you're going to have used your graph paper, and you're going to figure out that 2 is a good position for that Y. I want to do some changing up with the fonts on this, so I'm going to choose an academic engraved font. Go ahead and work with these and pick a couple of different ones and see which ones you like the best. This is the one I'm going to start with. I'm going to make sure it's bold. And I'm going to set it at 48 points so it's nice and large. I'm going to make the color of this maroon. And then the last thing I'm going to do is make sure it's on my layer 2 so it sits on top of the white box. I'll go ahead and submit that. And I have my first text object in here. Moving on to the next text object, it's going to be my second object, and it's the award name. Once again, I need to center it, so I'm going to do a tab C at 5.5, and I'm just going to call this my Honor Student Achievement Award. And for those of you like me who have issues with spelling, it's nice that spell check works for you there. Again, don't have to worry about my X coordinate because I've already set that with my tab C. I'm going to make this 2.5. I'm going to set this one to be Helvetica. Once again, it's going to be bolded. I'm going to set it at 18 points, and I'm going to put it on layer 2. You're going to work with those sizes, fonts, until you get what looks correct for you in your school. The next text is going to be my third text, and it's going to be my awarded 2 line. Once again, it's centered, and it's just going to say awarded 2. Don't have to worry about my X. My Y for this one, I'm going to put at 4.75. I'm going to leave this the default font. And I'm going to make it 18 points. Last thing I need to do is make sure it's on that layer 2 so it sits on top of the white box. Text object 4 then is going to be the actual student name. Tab that again to the center. And then I'm going to use the field for first name, the space, and then my field for last name. Again, the X doesn't matter. The Y for this is going to be at 5.5. I do want to make it a different font, so I'm going to go ahead and use try the Bradley hand. I want this bold. I want the size to be nice and big, so I'm going to go ahead and make that a 48 point as well. And once again, I'm going to make this a different color. I'm going to set it at maroon to match the heading, and so I don't lose it, make sure it's on layer 2. Notice here on the side page too, you can also see what layers everything's on. So if you do put something on the wrong layer, it's a nice indicator for you. The last text that I need to add is those signatures. This is going to be my 05 signatures. This one's a little bit different in that I'm not tabbing to the center because I have 2 different signatures, one for principal and one for superintendent. So I'm going to use a tab C, but it's not going to the middle. I'm going to put the first one at 3, and that's going to be my principal. Then I'm going to do a tab over using the center at 8 and call that my superintendent. Because I've used my tabs, I don't have to worry about the X coordinate here. I do need to know where I want my Y to be, and it's going to be 7 inches down the page. Once again, I'm going to leave this as the default. I'm going to put it at a 14 point though, and on my layer 2. So by using my tabs, I'm able to position the text on the page. Using the Y coordinates, I'm positioning it from top to bottom on the page, and I've created and added in my 5 text areas. By doing them independently, I was able to change the fonts and the sizes independent of each other. The next thing I want to put on is my logo for the school. Once again, I'm going to name it logo, and I'm going to use the RHS logo. The coordinates for this, though, a little tricky. You're going to have to figure that out ahead of time. In my case, I'm going to use a 4.5, 2.5, 6.5, and another 4.5. For my scaling, I want this to fill the box again, proportionally centered. And once again, this is going to be on layer 2, so it sits on top of the white box. The last thing I need to add to layer 2 are my lines for the signatures to go on. So I'm going to use a line object. This is going to be my signature line, so I'm going to name it signature lines. Lines are a little bit different in that I have to tell it the starting point and the ending point in XY coordinates. So I want this line to start at 1.5 inches from the left side of the paper and 6.75 inches down the page, so from the top. And I want it to end at 4.5 inches, so I'm going to make myself a 3-inch line, and I want it to be a straight line, so the horizontal location is still going to be 6.75. So any horizontal line, the y-axis will always be the same. Any vertical line, if you want it to be a straight vertical line, the x numbers will always be the same. In this case, it's 1 inch in width, or 1 pixel in width is fine. I'm going to leave the color as black. I have two of them though that need to go on the page. So instead of actually creating two lines, I'm going to use this repeat function of the lines, and I want it to repeat one time, but I want it to move over horizontally on the page. So I'm going to do a horizontal change of this, and that's a horizontal change from the start of the line, 5 inches. I don't want it to move down on the page, so I'm going to leave my vertical change at nothing. You can set your line style to any style you'd like, but I want this to be a solid line. And once again, I need to make sure it's on layer 2. Go ahead and submit that. So at this point, I've got my two boxes, layer 0 and layer 1. I've got my text, my logo, and my signature lines all entered into layer 2. So let's just take a look. I'm going to come back over and I'm going to find the first one that I ran, that DOB certificate. I'm going to click on the name of that certificate, and I'm just going to run that job again by using the Run Job Again checkbox. Click Submit. Right click on the view for that and open it in a new tab. So I've got my separate tab just for that report. And now you see we've got not only our boxes, but also our high school name, our Honor Student Achievement Award, the logo is in there, who it was awarded to, and that principal and superintendent information under the lines. The last thing to be added to our certificate to make it complete is that starburst object in the lower right corner. It's actually a circle object, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the circle object first so you have an idea where we're going with it before we actually place it on the report. So here are our different kinds of objects that can be created from a single circle object. You can actually use it to create stars, hexagons, starbursts, triangles, a variety of different things because it has a special property involved with this object. And that property is the ability to set not only the circle radius, but also the number of starburst points you want to use, and lastly, the starburst radius. So you can see by the diagram here how that lays out. To give you some examples, if I have a circle radius of 1 inch with 5 starburst points and a starburst radius of a ½ inch, it's going to create a star. Using a circle radius of 1 inch, a starburst of 3 points, and a starburst radius of a ½ inch again, I'm going to create a triangle. And lastly, with a circle of 1 inch, 8 starburst points, and a starburst radius of 0.9 inches, you see I'm going to create that octagonal stop sign view. So to put this object on, I need to know how many starburst points I want and what I want that starburst radius to be, as well as the circle radius. That's what we're going to do next on the actual report. So let's go ahead and add that starburst onto our certificate and finish it off. So I'm going to add the circle object. I'm going to call this my starburst. You have to lay out where you want the center point of that starburst to be. So in our case, I'm going to put this at 9.75 on the horizontal axis and at 7.25 on the vertical axis. I want my starburst, or my original circle, to be 1 inch in diameter. And because I want it to have that gold color, I'm going to make the color golden for both the line color, and we'll just copy that down to the fill color as well. The things that I have to add to this in order to make that starburst is how many points I want, and I've chosen I want 32 points, and what I want that starburst radius to be. I want the actual starburst radius to be 1/4 of an inch less than the real original circle, so it's going to be at 0.75. And last but not least, I need to make sure that I put this on layer 3 so it sits on top of anything else that's below it. Go ahead and click Submit there. And now I've added my starburst to my document, so I'm going to go back over to my report queue, click on my original document that I printed, choose to run it again, click Submit, and I'll right click on that, open it in a new tab so that we can view it. And now you see we have a nice starburst at the bottom of our certificate. It sits on top of the white box, the blue box, the line that is there for the superintendent's name because it is layer 3. I think you've learned a lot in this exercise by going through and creating the different types of objects, seeing how things react to each other. And I'm sure you've figured out that it's not hard, it's just very tedious. Having that graph paper and starting with the end in mind is going to be your best friend and the best advice I can give you. Wow, so here we are, down to our last report. It is going to be the multi-student report. So as you can see from the examples here, more than one student per page with information pulled from the system. This is actually the class roster report that we are going to create in this exercise. So you can see we're going to pull in the student information, their grade, gender, ethnicity, home phone, and emergency contact 1 and contact 2 phones. By doing this, it's a nice sheet for your instructors to have in their classrooms. So if there is an emergency, they have all that information at hand. The thing to note about a multi-student report is we're going to use a standard text object, but within that text object, there's a checkbox that allows me to go to the next student without going to a new page. So you're going to check that box to go to the next student, and then on the last student for that page, you're going to uncheck that box, which will allow it to go to a new page. Okay, so here we are setting up our shell for our roster report. Title name. I'm leaving the font at Palatino. Size of 10 with a line height of 12. I'm going to go ahead and leave this as a letter, setting all my margins to 0. It will be in portrait. Now if you want more columns, you can always change that to landscape. I want it to be users at all school and that teachers can print. Click submit on that. And now I have my shell set. So I can click on that and come in and start adding my text objects. Now this report is going to have multiple text objects. So once again, I want to start with numbering now. And this is going to start with my page title. In my page title, I want centered. So I'm using my tab C, half of 8.5, 4.25. And then my title for the page, which will be class roster. Since I've set my X with the tab, I don't need to worry about that here. And I want my Y to be 0.4 down the page. I do want this to be bold, and I want it to be a little larger than the rest of my font, so I'm going to make it at 16. Now the last couple of text objects that we've added, we haven't worried about the line height. And if you remember, the rule of thumb is 2 plus the size for line height. Everything that we've been working with have been single lines, so in that case I didn't need to worry about the line height. Go ahead and click submit. And I can create my second text object, which is going to be my column headers. Now, to save a little time, I've gone ahead and copied those, and I'm just going to paste them in here. But you can see I'm using tabs, tab lefts, to space out my column headers. And because I've started my first one at the beginning and haven't tabbed it, I am going to actually use my X to put that at 1/2 inch margin. And this one on the page is going to be at 0.95. Once again, because it is header information, I do want it bolded, and I'm going to make it 12 instead of my default 10, just to give it a little bit bigger size. Go ahead and click submit. Now I have my page title and my column header, and I'm ready to start doing each of my student lines. Now each student line is going to have to be its own text box. So this is going to be student 1. Everything in the student line is going to match what the header is, but it's going to pull the code for that header. So I'm just going to copy in my header information. I'm going to switch these over to actually be codes. So for the student, I'm going to bring in last first. The grade is actually the field grade level, so grade underscore level. Gender is the field gender, so all I need to do is add the tilde and parentheses around that. Ethnicity, the same thing. The field name is ethnicity, so tilde and parentheses for around that. Home phone is actually home underscore phone, so I just need to get rid of that space and make it an underscore. Now I don't remember the exact field for emergency contact phone, so I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to go to my fields list, start typing in emergency in my filter, and I can find that emergency phone 1 would be that. So it goes ahead and puts that in for me. Didn't take out my emergency 1, so I'm going to delete that. And I know that the 2 is emergency phone 2, so I'm just going to copy that, paste it over here, and change the 1 to 2. So using the same tab layout, it was pretty easy for me to get in that information for my students. Now, because I want to use these for each of the students going forward, I'm going to go ahead and select it and copy this information so I don't have to redo that every time. Once again, I need to set my X at 0.5, and I'm going to start setting my Y's here at 1.25. I'm going to leave these as the default font and height, and I'm not going to make them bolded. But this is that special move to next record after printing this text checkbox that you have to check in order for it to pull in the next student record without changing pages. So I'm going to check that box, click submit. There's my student 1. Now it just becomes a tedious task of adding the student information for each of these students. So this is going to be student 2. I'm going to paste in the information so I don't have to retype that. Now, these are all going to start with an X of 0.5, and the Y's of these are going to be 0.25 apart, a quarter inch apart. So my first one was 1.25, which would make my next one 1.5. The next one after that would be 1.75, 2.0, 2.25, and so on until I get to my last student for the page. Have to remember to check the box that I want to move to the next student, click submit. This just becomes a process of continuing this all the way down through all of your students until you get to about 10.5 on your Y coordinate, and then you'll be at your last student. Hardest part is going to be remembering which student you're on and where you're supposed to be. I was at 1.25, 1.5, so this is a 1.75. Checking the box, continuing on. So as you can see, I paused it and I've gone ahead and added the rest of the students all the way down to student 37. All of these are exactly the same, a quarter inch apart. So if you look down the sheet, you can see 6, 6.25, 6.5. And my last one here is 10.25. Now I want to end this with student 38. Student 37 still has the check, and I want to add one last student, student 38. Everything's going to be the same, so I'm pasting in my same information. This is going to be at 0.5 and 10.5, which would be the next quarter inch down. But this one, I will not check the move to next record box. And that will force it to move to the next page when it pulls up the next student. Go ahead and hit submit on that, and you see there they are. All 38 students. A rather tedious process, but you only have to do it once, and once it's done, you have a nice class roster report. So let's go ahead and take a look at that class roster report. I'm going to go back over to my other tab up here, go to my start page. I want to grab a group of students, and I want it to be more than 38 students. So here I've got the K's, and you see there's 71 students here. Go to my group functions drop down, select print report, and this time the report I want to print is my roster report. Now if I took care of doing all the coding correctly and making sure everything was right, when I look at the report, you'll see I have a nice class roster report. When it gets to the 38th student, it moves to the next page and starts over again. When it's done with all the students, it's done. Now this is test data, so you see I have a lot of repeating students, but you can also see where you have missing information as well in this report. So quickly and easily we created a class roster report. It took us time because we had to create one item for every student, but once we got it done, it's a pretty nice looking, easy to hand off to somebody report. So I think by now you get the idea that object reports aren't really that hard, they're just very tedious. Once you've done a couple of them and you get an idea for what the objects are and how they work, they're not hard to put together. What's really hard is making sure you get everything placed on the page where you want it. The good news, though, is you can export and share these reports. It's really easy. Once you have a report done, you simply open up the object report, scroll down to the bottom, and there's an option to export this report as a template. Now when you do this, all of these files are going to get exported and saved with a .pst extension, so you'll be able to find them. You can also attach them then to an email, send them off to somebody else. They can use them on their system. As long as you use the coding for things like school name and student information, then they should work with very little adjustments for anybody else that pulls them in. You can also use these to export out a report, import it back in as a copy, and then you can make adjustments to it. So like our class roster report, if we wanted the same type of report with different columns, we could export it out, import it back in as a copy, and then go into the main report parameters, give it a new name, work through the column headers, change them to what the new columns will be, and then change the first student information so it matches the new columns. Then simply copy and paste it to the rest of the students. It makes for an easier way to create new reports versus starting from scratch. So once you have it exported, you need to know how to get it back into your system. Well, you do this under the System left side menu option. It would be System, Import Report Template, and then on that page, you're going to click on the Choose File, go through your files, find the one that you want to import, and simply click Import. You'll find it the same place you find all the other reports then in your system, under System Report, Setup, Object Report, and then find the new report, click on it, and make the changes as needed. Since these can be shared, it now becomes a question of where do you find them. One of the richest places to find these types of reports is under PowerSource itself. If you don't already have an account for PowerSource, you need to talk with your system admin and get them to set one up for you. The website is powersource.pearsonschoolsystems.com, and once you get in there, if you go to the community area, you'll see where you can find things that have been shared by others. Another place to look for reports would be under the Yahoo Groups. If you go to groups.yahoo.com and you search for PSUG, P-S-U-G, you'll see that there's a ton of groups out there, and a lot of them have shared files and information under their sites. Also, you can talk with others in your district or county and see if they have a report. If you find somebody with the report, just ask them to share it. Most people are very willing to do this. So I'd like to thank you very much for downloading this and viewing this video. My hope is that you will take the knowledge that you've learned and create some reports to help improve your PowerSchool with some very informative new ways of looking at the data. And I also hope that should you need assistance with customization, hosting, support, or training, you think of Computer Logic Group, because we truly are one company dedicated to your PowerSchool success. Thank you and have a great day.